You joining us today with live with Top Voices Unite. I want to welcome you. I am Nikki Estes, the founder of Top Voices Unite and the CEO of Market Be More. Our goal is to help knowledge experts, founders, leaders, and organizations amplify their voices and create measurable impact. I saw a viral video today that stopped me, and I believe it relates to Michael and what it is he's trying to do. Today, our guest is Michael Lopez. He's an author, a podcast host, a transformational consultant, and he has spent years helping Fortune 500 companies to navigate large-scale changes. Michael, this video was two people passing incredibly heavy weights back and forth. I don't know if you got to see it today.
I saw it briefly. I didn't get to comment, but I saw it.
Well, there was the strength there, but then there was this trust, right? And the timing, passing it back and forth. And there was this core that I don't quite have developed after birthing all of my children. But that made me think about organizations and how they have to have trust, how they have to have that good timing, and how they need to thrive through transformation. And that's your baby there. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, no, it's a great video. And I've actually, maybe this is a little bit of a flex. I've actually done that before with someone. So it's actually kind of fun. It does. I mean, I think it's a metaphor for a lot of things, as you've rightly spelled out. But, you know, companies are groups of people. And I think sometimes we forget that in all sorts of ways. And people have experiences and they build relationships. And that's the quality of a team, is based on shared experience and the quality of our relationships, which is founded in trust. And you really don't make it very far without that. I spent a lot of time helping companies rebuild trust after things break down. So we can get into some of those details. But yeah, I thought it was a great video. And you know, thankfully, people are also complex, and that's why I have a job. So.
Well, your job has gone into organizations like Clorox, DoorDash, Meta. I mean, not just any places. Tell me about some of those experiences, how you were able to be a part of those transformations at those places.
Yeah, you know, they all take on different shapes. Sometimes it's about culture. Sometimes it's about a team. Sometimes it's about a function, an organization, a legal team, or finance. And so the trigger is always different. The why maybe a team is struggling, or what they're trying to accomplish, or the whole organization. I'm wrapping up a project right now with a local client here in the Sacramento area, and we've built their whole culture and strategy and redesigned it, and they're off and running in a whole new trajectory after 2 years together. So it really does just depend. That project, by the way, sort of funny, started because they wanted me to do a business process reengineering exercise of looking at some of their loan products. And I was like, you don't have a process problem, you have a people problem. And we ended up kind of rebuilding everything from the inside out. So, you know, the why I show up depends on what maybe the immediate pain is that people are experiencing or the company's experiencing. But we end up spending a lot of time reflecting on where that pain comes from. And we often find, like that example I just gave, that it actually comes from somewhere else. And that's part of my job. And what I do is to dig into that and rebuild it from the inside out. So it's been a great journey. I've worked in just about every industry you can imagine, which is great, because it allows me to compare across industries. How you make money is just a matter of strategy. So thankfully, you know, again, people are people. As long as companies keep employing people, I'll keep having a job.
Sure. Well, you made a good point there about the strategy and money. So any industry, you can go in there and it's the same kind of mechanics that you work through, starting with who are the people that you speak with before you start putting together that strategy.
Well, you said mechanics. It's the same kind of dynamics, is maybe a better description, about the relationships between people and what they experience when it comes to change. So I've worked with, I mean, clearly, you know, C-suite executives are the place where I start a lot of my conversations. They're the ones that are looking usually from a performance lens. Why aren't we delivering the kind of returns that we want? I have a client right now that's in the nuclear energy space. They've been a client of mine for quite some time. They're at the bottom of the industry in terms of plant reliability, which is basically a big metric that says your plants are not running as much as they should. And of course, when your plant's not running, that means you're not making money. And so we've been on a 1.5 year long journey to rebuild that, and they're on track. They've been in the 4th quartile. So the way they get measured in the industry is you get measured in these buckets. And the nuclear industry is interesting because they don't compete with one another. It's it's kind of a shared exercise because they're all regulated and all of this. But they've been at the bottom for quite some time. They're on track to be in the third quartile this month. They're on track to be in the second quartile in September, and by early February 2027, as they keep going, they'll be in the first quartile for the first time in like 7 or 8 years. And so all of that was built not from just a technical strategy, but from an understanding of what are the behaviors that are leading us to poorly perform in plant reliability. And that comes down to how we make decisions. It comes down to how we delegate work. It comes down to how we use metrics. And so we go down into the depths of those behavioral patterns, and we work with a team to shift the actions I actually take that ladder up to performance rather than just setting new targets, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So then are you creating training that is upskilling from the top, and then the top is going and upskilling through a program? Okay.
Quite differently, actually, because that's been one of the, I think, mistakes that the world of organizational change has made. It's one of the things that I call out in my study, which maybe we'll talk a little bit about, is what organizations do when they try to change is very much a top-down driven experience. And change is a personal experience. Change is one that has to happen as close to you, the individual, as possible. And so what you see a lot from organizations when it comes to change is broad scale communications, which, by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. You need to talk about what you're doing, but it's kind of necessary, not sufficient. So you'll see things like broad comms, newsletters, email updates. You'll see training that goes out to everyone that's designed to create awareness and understanding. And again, those things are fine. But the traditional OCM kind of organizational change management plan is what I call a consumption model, which is I, as the employee, consume material that the organization gives me to try to teach me something new. But change is a participation model. It's more about exertion. I have to practice. I have to make mistakes. I have to repeat that process. I need coaching, feedback, direction, and I need to iterate myself through a series of behavioral changes that then change my performance. And so it has to be from the inside out, the bottom up. It's more about creating a movement than it is about creating a program. And so that's the way that I work with companies all the time. And it's very different. And a lot of those findings have been validated in the study that we did, which is that's what people need.
So this is a nationwide research project. You called it Rethinking Change Management. And it was about 1,000 people that you had. Okay. And so that was a discussion over why traditional OCM is failing, the AI literacy mandate, a human premium, future-proofing leadership, and how organizations move from reacting to disruption to thriving because of it. That's huge. So let's talk about it.
Well, maybe start with talking about why I decided to do the study, because most of us have seen the 70% of all transformations fail stat that's been thrown around. That was from a McKinsey study, I think, just before the pandemic sometime. And that statistic has been widely cited and used to describe why change doesn't work. But no one ever asked the employees what they need. That study was actually done. It was a relatively small sample, but it was asking executives about their own programs. And there's nothing wrong with that. Again, it's perfectly good to ask executives what they think of the work that is being done in their organizations, but it never really got to the point of describing employee needs. So we asked 1,000 people across all levels of the organization, ages 18 to 59, what they need when it comes to change and what they get and what they're missing. And the results have been really pretty staggering. I had a few hypotheses going into the study about what we'd see. A lot of those came back just from my own experience about what I had been experiencing myself. And so it really covers 5 big themes that maybe we can talk about, but it really has been a really eye-opening study that's getting great traction with executives, particularly with change leaders who are finally feeling some relief. I just talked to someone the other day who said it's great that somebody finally said the quiet part out loud. So.
Well, tell me about those 5 big themes. Let's dive into that.
Yeah. So I won't go into each one maybe in super depth if you want to pick one or two that we can jump into. But the first one, and it's a stat that I've led with in a couple of conversations. So we asked people a very simple question. What do you get when it comes to change from your organization in terms of resources, training, et cetera? And what is it that you need? And we gave them a big list, and they picked the 5 top things that they get. And then they picked the 5 things that they actually need. And there was 0 overlap between those 2 lists. And so what you would expect is we got emails, we got communications, we got some training, all of those things. But what I need are the things I listed before. I need time to experiment. I need feedback. I need to be able to make mistakes safely in a way that doesn't impact performance. I need to experiment and try new ways of adjusting my behavior and allowing enough space to move through the experience of learning how I do things in the new way. I need to see my leaders go first. I need to see them not just talk about it, but I need to see them actually doing the thing that they're asking me to do. And so, that really, I thought that question was going to be a dramatic one. I didn't expect it to have 0 overlap between what they needed and what they got. So yeah, it really has become quite a conversation starter, as you could imagine. And I guess I would say, I'll talk about the other 4 in a second. I guess I would say that part of that is because, emails and communications and training, those things are easy to track. I can track how many people opened my newsletter. I can track how many people went to training. I can track how many people opened the email, the number of people I sent it to. And on some level, I think that feels both satisfying and as if it's a measure of progress in the organization. But again, change is personal. You have to get down to the individual. And so while you might, I don't know, how many trainings have you done passively online for 30 minutes and then suddenly you were a different person? No, that's not how it works. You have to take that material and apply it to your life on a daily basis over time. Those people in the video that you shared, they didn't learn how to do that by watching someone in 5 minutes. They had to take a whole series of steps: core, balance, stability, lower body strength, upper body strength, flexibility, all of these things to be able to do that. Those are the behaviors you should be practicing, not just watching someone do that and trying to mimic it. So it's really a foundational premise of the way that I work with companies. Sorry, go
I
ahead.
went to an event the other day with Rochelle Khanna, and I got to watch her present much differently than any of the other events that I went to. She interacted, asked questions, had people come up on stage with her, and that was the most, I would say, positive and long-lasting lessons that they got. If you're going to go power skill, to have that kind of workshop environment instead of just speaking at you.
Right.
So I can see where that would be most beneficial for those that are needing that change, and then also needing that workshop time to actually implement the things that they're learning.
Change is not a spectator sport. You have to do things. You have to act. It's about, I did a post on this years ago, and if it's quite simple, if you want to be different, you have to do different. You have to take action. And so that, I think, has been one of the biggest, most dramatic pieces of feedback that I've given organizations is stop telling people what to do, give them the space to do it and learn. But of course, there's a lot of pressure about ROI and targets and time and all of these things, and change never takes, it always takes you longer than you want it to. And so those are things that I help companies unwind. Some of the other big findings that have been really interesting, I've been talking about one this week, which is something I call the generational divide. It is unfortunately a pretty sad story for us Gen Xers, myself in that category, although I don't know that I put myself in the same category, which is, it appears from the research that a lot of Gen X leaders have kind of atrophied in place, that this generation that raised themselves, we were the latchkey kids who grew up figuring it out, navigating college, early careers, rising to positions of leadership, have seemingly reduced their resilience quotient a bit. And they're the ones who need the most training, who don't want a lot of leadership modeling, who don't really feel the need to take mentorship roles with older and younger millennials and Gen Z, because they look down at those and say, hey, I just figured it out. Why don't you go do the same? And I was really surprised by that finding. I certainly try to do as much as I can to give to the next generation behind me. But, Gen X occupies 30% of the workforce. A large majority of leadership positions in companies today. These are people who are 48, I think, to 48 to 60, somewhere in that range, depending on how you do the math. And I think we all collectively have a real responsibility to lead by example. And so that finding was really pretty stark. In keeping with that, there's another leadership gap that I think is important that came out as another theme. That's not just about Gen X by itself, but I think more broadly, there is a very much do as I say, not as I do kind of problem when it comes to change. On the one hand, leaders are recognizing that they are responsible for driving change. They realize that having the ability to change is important. They get a lot of the training and a lot of the communications, because what do most OCM providers do? They go top down through an organization and they make sure leadership knows what's going on. So there's a readiness that happens at the leadership level where they feel more aware, more confident, and some sort of seemingly more informed, and yet they're not modeling the change themselves. They feel like, no, I'm informed, I'm aware, but this is for everybody else. This is for the workers. And so there's a gap in that space that I think is really important. And go back to the zero overlap finding, which is, what do younger people want to see? They want to see their leaders going first, and that's not happening. And so there's a huge gap in participation when it comes to change from the leadership levels. Yeah, go ahead. You have a question on that one?
Yeah, I was thinking about with AI. They're going to have to learn more about it, have that literacy than the younger generation. They need to show how it's being used within their companies, right? How do you see that?
So we're starting to see the data come back about some of these AI pilots already, and you've seen companies pull back pretty starkly. What was the response that most companies had? Which is, they went and bought a bunch of licenses, they bought a bunch of compute space, they handed those tools to their employees, and they said, go do stuff. And while on some level, experimentation and exploration is a big part of the change experience, it has to be directed. It has to be supported. It has to be pointed at some kind of a goal that I'm approaching that helps me understand. By the way, that's how we stay motivated, is by approaching goals. But I need to have some context to that. And what is the context that most employees have received when it comes to AI? Teach it how to do your job faster and better. And oh, by the way, we might lay you off when you're done. That's not an incentive to participate in this experience. And so leadership understands and has been incentivized to say AI is a tool to remove cost from the business. And they've been given all the briefings, all the statistics, all the metrics, all the ROI targets. They've been told all about what the goals are. And yet those individuals aren't needing to participate in that experience because they're not the ones doing the work. They're not the ones trying to redesign an operational workflow. That's happening down closer to the front end of the business. And so this is an experience that we asked in the study, which is, how ready are you for the AI experience that's coming? Overwhelmingly, executives were much more prepared than employees. And I think it plays to that dynamic in terms of what people are expecting to happen, what people are expecting the organization to do in terms of support, and what the goals are in that process. And so it's really, I think we're seeing it play out in real time.
So what skills should employees develop over these next years?
Well, I mean, I think that's pretty clear. If, this, I'm a huge AI person in the sense that I use it a lot. I actually think I'm pretty good. I try to do as much as I can, experiment quite a bit, but I'm not an AI doomsdayer. And I think the data is starting to show that people still matter. And I think the study that we've done reinforces, in fact, it's the last big theme. There's a fourth theme in there that I'll talk about, but maybe I'll talk about the fifth one right now, because it's related to the question, which is the skills around connection, trust, communication, experimentation, innovation, excuse me, those all still matter. What we need to do, and I call them the skill of thinking and acting like an entrepreneur, is within your job is about solving problems in novel, interesting ways. And AI is a tool that can facilitate, both in terms of speed, as in volume of problems that you could solve, the number of problems that you could solve, but also the ideation of other solutions that you may not think about. Now, if everyone's asking the same questions of the same LLMs, and if you've learned anything about how they work, the big criticism of AI is that it can't create anything new, but it can interact with you in a way that I think allows you to come up with creative solutions on your own. And that process, I think, is the skill that people need to have. Think like an entrepreneur and understand that failure, repetitions, mistakes, trying again, the experience of starting over through an iterative process of testing and learning is absolutely the skill that people need to build. And if you can learn the technology, that's great. But I think those are the skills that every company I've come and worked with, all of the operational, functional details aside, this is still about people working together, and they have to get something done. It's like the video you did. If I threw the barbell and no one was there, nothing happens. And so AI is a tool that allows you to accelerate and enhance that experience, but it's not going to be the surrogate that takes that experience from you. You're still going to have to learn how to interact with real people. In fact, my nuclear client, I say this to them all the time. If you ever spent time in the nuclear space, it's obviously very detailed. It's very technical for all the reasons that you would expect. And they love a good checklist. Everything has a checklist because you want to make sure it's safe. And they've got checklists for checklists for checklists. It's really quite impressive. And I've said this to them on more than one occasion. There's no checklist that will ever remove your responsibility to interact with another human being. That person on the other side of that experience is having an experience, and it's not dictated by the technology. It's dictated by you.
That goes to speak towards your investment in people gap, correct?
Yeah. So part of the finding that is included in here is about the formula that's needed for what it is to help people change. And it goes back to that first theme about the zero overlap, which is we're not getting what we need. And all of it goes back to the science of adaptation and behavioral change and what we know works within the science of change. We know so much about how the human body works. We know so much about how the human brain works. But again, we show up to business and we sort of forget all of that. And it comes down to a pretty simple recipe that I've mentioned throughout this discussion. It comes down to time. So change never happens as quickly as you want, particularly as adults. It's always going to take you longer than you think. And so one of the pressures that employees feel is the artificial establishment of financial targets that drive the business and people to try to meet those targets. There's nothing wrong with having financial goals. That's why businesses exist. But there's rarely an alignment between the establishment of that goal and what people actually need to be able to change. So the first thing is to understand there needs to be a better balance there. The second one that I mentioned before is this difference between training and experimentation. Look, we all need training to understand what to do. I need to know the new thing. I need to see it and watch it happen, whatever it may be, whether it's a technology that we're all experiencing with AI, or whether it's a new business model or a new product or whatever it is. Yes, I need to see it and learn about it, but then I need to interact with it. And I need to go out. If I'm in sales, I need to go talk to customers, and I need to mess it up a few times. I need to fumble through it. I need to, give me the talking points, but I need to go put my stamp on it. I need to put my personality on it. And that only comes through repetition and experimentation. Repetition is the way that we learn. There's a fancy word for it in the world of neuroscience, which is called long-term potentiation. And all it means is if I want to learn something new, I need to repeat that behavior over and over and over and over and over again. And most of the time in companies, we don't have the time and space to make that kind of repetition happen, which is why it happens slower than we want it to, because I'm sort of dragging that timeline out. The last big thing around the science of change that's part of this is we need to be able to make mistakes. Mistakes are the single greatest contributor to the opportunity for neuroplasticity that we have. A mistake is a signal to your brain that something needs to change. But most of us, number one, don't like to make mistakes because we're all trying to get promoted or get ahead or make the sale or impress a client, whatever it may be. And mistakes aren't really built into the timeline for implementation for a lot of these rollouts. And so we sort of expect everything to go perfectly the first time. But the reality is we need to mess it up a little bit to be able to adjust and learn and figure out, how do I want to tweak that cadence of interaction? How do I want to tweak that customer outreach campaign that I'm doing? How do I want to tweak my marketing plan? How do I want to tweak my product launch? all of those things require us to get close to an answer, test it, figure out what I need to adjust. But we try to get it right the first time, every time. And that always doesn't really work. The last big piece of the science of change that's been part of this is people need support and space. And support means I need to have someone by my side helping me do this as I go. That sounds blatantly obvious, but it's the way that support shows up. When I make a mistake, how do I help get corrected through that experience? Am I shamed? Am I pressured? Or am I told, okay, let's work through, why did that happen? How do I coach you up through the moment? And then I need space, meaning that I need to have not just the time, but the sort of psychological freedom to be able to explore in ways that the business then becomes the beneficiary of. So rather than me saying, Nikki, here's your 3 goals, I'd want you to say, Nikki, here's 3 goals, but if you find a 4th and a 5th, bring those back to us so we can harness that energy and information from you and figure out ways to use that for the betterment of the business. And a lot of times people are given, you're handed your goals, and we know that we own what we create, which means if I come up with my own goal, I'm far more attached to it than if you hand me yours. And so that always doesn't come up in the experience of change. And, again, those are some things that I do with my clients all the time.
So when, let's say there's failure, right? And there's repeated failure and you're okay with it because you've gotten smart and you know how to be able to build that into your timeline. What does a performance review look like though, when they continue to fail and they're not really picking up what you're putting down?
Well, clearly there's levels to this. And I think not all failure is the same. We're not talking about, first of all, catastrophic failures that would derail the business or, sink a business unit or something like that. And we're not talking about moral or ethical failures that would be easy to spot. So let's get those off the table. I think what you're describing is the pace at which I'm able to improve and learn and close the space between proficiency, which is the thing that I am supposed to be doing well and whatever my performance is today. You mentioned the performance review. First of all, the performance review needs to honor the process of learning as an element of growth. And so I say this all the time, which is progress is directional. It's not absolute. As long as you're getting better, that should be the goal. It's incremental improvement over time. Now, because we're a social species and because there's people of different abilities, you might be far faster at getting better than I am. And that's why we have promotions, and that's why we have leadership roles and all of those things. And so then I think that becomes, number one, it becomes the performance review should honor that growth is directional, not absolute. As long as I'm seeing progress in some form or another, then I believe that person should be given the chance to continue to move forward. Now, if there's something that they're not learning because they have a skill gap, a knowledge gap, or whatever, then yeah, maybe that's a conversation of you should be doing something else. Maybe we find a different role for you. But the effort of continuing to try to learn is a big element of our motivational experience. Change is about the effort we put into it as much as it is the outcome. And this is a mistake that companies make a lot. We make it as people. I want to lose 30 pounds by February 28th. It's January 1st. It doesn't work that way. What should matter is I want to be someone who puts in the effort to exercise and eat healthy every day. That would be a way to reframe that goal. You'll eventually get to 30 pounds. It might take you all of the year, but you'll get there. Companies don't do that. They say, hey, we want to save so much money by a certain amount of time, or we want to have so many customers on our platform by a certain amount of time. And let's say you get 80% of the way there. Are you a failure? No, it's 80% more than you would have otherwise if you had taken no action. And so I really help companies try to think about rewarding the effort that we put into trying to change as much as the outcome that you get, because that's why people quit. Is if I'm trying and I'm not getting any response, then I just give up and I walk away from my goals. And now I've lost an employee who otherwise could be contributory to the business. And so that's a piece of this, which is number one, progress is directional. So honor the fact that I'm making incremental progress. And then two, celebrate and reward the effort people are making, as long as it's well-intentioned and directed at the goals of the organization. If they're willing to keep going, let them keep going and coach them through how to get better.
Bring in the support for them when they need that gap
That's
shortened.
right.
So you are, instead of prioritizing profit, then it's purpose and the workforce development. When I'm talking with Mark Finnick, one of our other top voices unite, he says that there are the 4 math that I should evaluate every single deal with. So we're increasing revenue, we are reducing risk, which could be risk of compliance or risk of losing clients, risk of losing employees. We are lowering our costs and we are enhancing performance. And with all of those 4, that's how I'm evaluating my vendors, how I'm evaluating my sales, how I'm evaluating my team. What would you say to that? I mean, because you've got 4 elements going on there, and I don't hear purpose or workforce development in any of that.
Well, maybe Mark and I should get on and have a little debate about what the right direction is. Look, all of those things are important. And eventually, you need to be able to deliver on those outcomes if you're helping an organization through change. My point of view is, and let's take the exercise example again really quickly, but I'm going to talk about running. So if I wanted you to run faster, I wouldn't just give you a target that says, okay, you run a 12-second 100-meter. I want you to run 11.5. That's let's just call that my profit number. Okay. I want you to earn a certain target. Okay. And I want you to improve your start so that you can hit that number. So that's another target. I want you to take 1/10 of a second off of your start or whatever it may be. Okay. So let's take those 2 things. Those would be 2 business goals that you would create. Well, the question is, if I want to earn more profit and I want to be more efficient, that's what a start is. It's about efficiency. How do I do that? It's not just about establishing the target itself, and it's not just about looking at the progress. I have to look at the people who execute those processes and understand why are they not able to perform in those moments the way I want. And that's a behavioral issue. And so what I do is I take a step back from that and I ask, okay, what's holding you back from a faster start? Why are you unable to do that? Okay, let's look at that. Well, my foot turnover and my foot placement is in the wrong spot. What's stopping you from an extra 1,000 sales with this particular customer? Well, I don't have the right relationships. Okay, let's go back through that. Why is that the case? Well, I don't know that I've felt comfortable enough to reach out to some. Okay, why is that? And I go in in the opposite direction. All the way down to the essential elements of that behavioral structure of that individual and team. And then we go solve that problem. And I guarantee you, when we solve that problem, performance comes. Just like if I were teaching you to run faster, I'd say, where's my start? Let's work on that. Okay, what's your strength? What's my stride length? Let's get my stride length better. Let's get my angle of my start better in terms of where my head. Yeah, you would do all of these things that go into a sprint, and you would practice those individual things once you figured out what you were doing wrong, and then you would hit an 11.5. You wouldn't just try harder. And a lot of times what happens in businesses is they set the targets and they look at the process and they tell the leaders, try harder, do better. But if I don't understand why I'm unable to do better, which is a behavioral problem, you can ask me to get faster all you want. It's not going to happen. I need to go back into the behavioral patterns of that organization and solve the problem there. And that's what I do with my clients.
So there's a lot of psychology that you've taken in over the years. Did you get a psychology degree?
No. I've got a political science degree and an MBA.
Okay.
Perfect for the job I do, right? Yes, I know. It's so funny. People ask me, how did you get this job? And it's a long story, but
maybe we'll get that story some other time.
Some other time.
Okay.
There is a lot of understanding. What I would say is that, first of all, the research on the brain that's available today is just overwhelming. When I wrote my book, I dove into the studies and I read a lot of authors and a lot of scientists who spell these concepts out very clearly. It's all there. There's nothing that I've put in my book or that I use with my clients that wasn't already existing. What I did was very much ask myself a pretty simple question, which is, what is the experience of the individual when it comes to change? What do we know about the brain and the body as it relates to how we create adaptation in people? Let's apply that to the world of business. And I found novel ways to organize those concepts and those truths into experiences, and I don't want to call it training because I don't do training. I create experiences for my clients to go through that help them understand how to change. And once they learn how to change, then they do it themselves. And that's really all I've done, was assembled the research that's been out there to be able to apply it to the world of work, because I just felt like the world of formalized organizational change management, and I've said this a bunch, and full of good people working hard, trying to do the right thing. If 70% of all transformations fail, and we've been doing the same thing for the better part of 2 decades, something's not working. And that's become my mission, to inject a new level of thinking and understanding and practice into the world of change.
So tell me, 5 years from now, what's it going to look like? How will companies separate themselves from using technology, adopting AI? How will you see those transformations being different than today?
Well, one of the themes we didn't talk about, the other big theme that was in the data, and it's a good setup, is something we call the minimization failure gap, which is, there is a structural problem in the way that change is procured in big businesses. And again, I've been on this side, so I can say this because I've experienced it, which is, we communicate that change is easy. We sell the technical solution, and we sell the nirvana of the future revenue profit world that we're all going to end up in. And we forget to tell people that the journey is going to be really hard. It's going to be harder than you think. It's going to be more expensive than you think. It's going to take longer than you think. And why do we do that? Is because it sounds good. It sounds good to sell the easy button, and it feels good when you're competing with other vendors and you go, hey, here's my $1 million technical solution, but don't worry, we're only reserving $50K for change because this is going to be so easy. It's going to be, we've done this 100 times. And again, I go back to, if 70% of all transformations fail, if you've done it 100 times, that means 70 of those times it didn't work. So stop selling me a bill of goods here. I know. So I think the first step is to be honest about what it really takes to change. And that's been one of my goals, which is, the first thing I think that would be different is that we would change the way we talk about change, and we would change our expectations of how long and how much investment is required to make that happen. Because in this little cycle that's been created of this minimization failure gap, is what happens is, we tell people it's going to be easy. We lower the resources of investment within the company to go make that happen. And then what happens? It gets hard. And it gets hard. And then all the employees who heard it was going to be easy, I've magnified their experience of hard because they thought it was going to be easy. And then I'm under-resourced because I only put a fraction of the total spend into that change support. And so now people are also experiencing difficulty and complexity and stress, and they're lacking support and space. And just a few minutes ago, I said, what do people need? Support and space, and they're not getting it. And so it amplifies the problem, which is change doesn't go well. And there's a whole bunch of stats in the study about how people have lost faith in their companies because of how badly change has gone. They've stopped trusting them that the next one is going to go better. And it perpetuates into this cycle that we all just give up before we even start. And so my hope is 5 years from now, I think companies, CEOs, leaders will talk about it differently. They'll change what they expect in terms of the change experience. They'll change where they get it. They'll expect different things from the OCM community in terms of a little bit more truth telling. And then I think mostly this leadership gap that I talked about in the study is, they will fundamentally understand that if leaders don't go first, all of this is for nothing. And so I think it'll change the expectation of where change starts and how it perpetuates and how it sustains.
I look forward to seeing that world.
We'll see. We'll see.
The idea of the leaders going first and then giving the team that support and space after that. I mean, that's a growth right there that would be huge for a lot of the companies. I took out when you had said you're always going towards a goal. So if that's what we're looking for 5 years from now, that's the goal, to plug you in to those kinds of experiences with companies. I believe that we will see the change. So those that are here today, you can read Michael's book, Change. You can also download his study, and the study is right from your website now, correct?
Correct.
You have it downloadable?
Yep.
Okay. And then how else can people get a hold of you besides your website and downloading this? Where would you like them to find you?
Obviously, we're all on LinkedIn here together, so I spend a lot of time. I post a stat a week from the study itself, and each of those I have a month by month theme that is rolling out, and I share a stat from the study. That's a great place to interact. I'll dive into that stat and share my own commentary about why I think it's important. So you can follow me there. I have my own podcast, which you've been on, which is Top Voice Tuesday. Now that is a broader than just change. It's a chance to feature other leaders in the world of business and beyond to talk about the most contemporary issues, just like you do here. So sometimes we get into change topics, sometimes we don't, but you can find that podcast on all of your favorite podcast platforms and on YouTube. And so we just crossed 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. So we're pretty excited for that. So those would be the two best ways. I do a lot on Instagram as well. So not as much on X, but you can find me there.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing this conversation with me today. The Top Voices Unite has this community of all these leaders like you. And we're finding that technology is not the biggest issue that we're having within our companies. It's communication, it's leadership, it's visibility, it's trust. And you've seen that for yourself. So I appreciate you coming and joining, helping us to translate what you're working on so that we could be able to properly refer you. We could be able to find people that are within our audience, the founders, investors, corporate executives that are looking for how we can be able to adopt transformation in the future. I have a note here that you are sitting directly at the intersection, helping leaders to understand that future belongs not to organizations that change once, but to organizations that are learning continuously. And I believe that this is a key element that all of our team needs to have, all of our community members, anyone that is seeking a job or in a job, is that first you needed to learn how to learn, and then you need to have that space and give yourself that time to be able to study. So thanks for reinforcing some of those. And I have much to learn. I'm going to go back to my team now to think about maybe areas that I might be failing. So thank you.
Failing and making mistakes are a good thing. As long as you're not hurting yourself or others, it's how you learn. So we should all embrace mistakes as a path to growth. I saw on the screen here, by the way, that it says the YouTube channel it's not Michael J. Lopez 9 anymore. It's actually the Top Voice Podcast. So you can go find me there, and I will send that to you so you guys have the right one.
Okay. Well, thank you. Well, those that came today, I saw at least Anabov here. I saw Chinny here. I saw several others. Thank you so much for attending today. And if you're watching a replay, you can comment something that you've learned, some way that you can be able to implement what we've talked about today. And if you would like to meet Michael, I would be glad to give you an introduction. Thanks so much for coming. All right. You all have a great rest of your Thursday.
Thank you.
See you next time.